30 disturbing encounters, 7 levels. I spent countless hours working on this iceberg to ensure it's exclusively made up of the most terrifying content humanity has to offer. We'll start with the strange and slowly work towards the most disturbing encounters on the iceberg. Let's start at the tip. Level 1. Shay Zonay. On October 9th, 2017, Shay Zonay took her daughter out for a cute day together, spending a few hours at the mall. But when they arrived at the food court, their fun day was about to take a very sinister turn. Shay had been filming the entire adventure, which she later uploaded as a 22.5-minute video, including an extremely unsettling, disturbing encounter. At the food court, Shay allowed her daughter to go play in the play area with all the other kids. But while she sat with the other parents, Shay started to notice something strange and kind of unsettling. An odd-looking man was hanging around the play area, looking right at Shay's daughter, along with 2 other little girls who were there with their mom, but no fathers. Initially, Shay assumed that maybe this man was the father of one of these children. But the more she watched her daughter play, the more she noticed that this strange man was pacing back and forth behind her, as if waiting to do something very, very sinister. And that's when Shay knew she had to step in and get out of there. Shay rushed in, picking her up and deciding that they had to go home right away. Obviously, her daughter was disappointed, but the risk and threat to her life were too significant to ignore. But when they left the mall, Shay realized that the creepy guy was following them. The man had come out of the mall just after Shay and her daughter and settled down on a bench to watch them pack up and leave. Fortunately, the man didn't do anything. He didn't make any move or threaten anybody, ultimately going in a different direction. But Shay was creeped out by him and his totally unreadable motive. It's possible that had she not moved quicker, something very, very bad could have happened here. Bear charge. On July 5th, 2020, Vahid Karlsberg, a Swedish YouTuber, posted a video to YouTube. He wanted to share an experience he had on a mountaintop in Swedish Lapland with his dog Riley. Vahid had climbed to the top of the mountain for a camping adventure in the snow, but what began as a beautiful outdoor adventure of fishing and camping turned into something much, much more dramatic. At first, the video showed them enjoying the peaceful atmosphere and the environment with some calm fishing. But as the video goes on, the tone starts to shift. Suddenly, Vahid notices something strange in the distance. It's a bear, but it's much, much closer than it should be. Usually bears in this part of the world avoid humans, but they're notoriously unpredictable, and Vahid knows that. Suddenly, he realizes the seriousness of the situation, especially when the bear starts to approach the campsite. It's clear to see Vahid's growing anxiety and desperate efforts to control the situation and minimize any damage that could arise. But the bear suddenly charges at the campsite, escalating the situation from just risky to outright deadly. The bear presumably thought that Vahid or Riley was a threat to his dominance and decided to attack before he could be attacked. But Vahid's survival instincts kick in just in time. Vahid knows that loud noises and confidence signal to the bear that the human is not prey, so he grabs rocks and starts throwing them at the bear while yelling, which turns out to be just enough to stop the bear from charging. The bear retreats back into the woods, leaving Vahid and Riley to process what they just witnessed. This could have ended much differently had Vahid not thought on his feet. It wouldn't be the first or last video where an innocent camper got killed by a bear because he underestimated the danger he was facing. Stealth camper stalked. The Northwest Wind is a YouTuber known for his love of stealth camping, a kind of camping where people try to slip under the radar in their camping spots. But tonight, his video was going to go very, very wrong in an unbelievably unsettling way. The Northwest Wind was stealth camping in a rural forest in the northwest of America, trying to slip under the radar without anybody noticing that he was there, as per usual. But when he pulled out his phone to start recording, he noticed a light shining in his direction. He knew immediately that this was not a good sign, But it was about to get worse and very, very intense very quickly. Outside his tent, he could hear people speaking, saying aggressive things, threatening him, harassing him. One of the worst possible situations for a stealth camper to have to endure.
I don't know if they could see it or not through the tent. I don't think so. I'm leaning right up against the light, but somebody's walking around out there very close to the tent.
He knew that the situation was about to turn very, very nasty if he didn't do anything. So he did the only thing he could think of to calm the situation and not escalate it anymore. He ran. Holding his phone tightly, he recorded the entire encounter, abandoning his camping gear and fleeing into the darkness. The video was too dark to make out who might be hunting him down, but the terrified desperation in his voice can't be ignored. But then, he trips and falls at a horrible moment just as the camera cuts out, leaving us unaware of what happens next. Of course, we know that he managed to get away, as he's continued to put out videos, but he's never actually spoken about who caught him, why they chased him, or really what happened after this. All of his camping and video equipment was lost, but in fleeing the scene, he may well have saved his life. Level 2. Woman in the Road. On June 2nd, 2018, around 1:46 a.m., police in Texas were on a routine evening patrol with their dash cams on. But Sergeant Scott happened to notice a very unusual situation. The car ahead of him inexplicably swerved and braked in a highly erratic way. Initially suspecting that the driver may be under the influence or maybe even having a medical issue, Scott was ready to pull over. But then he noticed that the car had actually reacted to what seemed to be an object lying in the middle of the road. It looked like nothing Scott had seen. But as his car got closer, he realized that it was not an object, it was actually a woman. Her body was just laying there on the road, lifeless and asking for trouble. Obviously, he had no choice but to pull over and check it out, hoping that she wasn't dead, or that he could do something to avoid a serious accident. Fortunately, she wasn't dead. By the time Sergeant Scott got there, he could see that she was just unconscious in the worst possible place, but now he had to find a way to get her out of the road and away from danger. After waking her up, he managed to get her on her feet and tried to move her out of the way of the dangerous oncoming traffic, but it was clear that the woman was drunk. She had been behind the wheel, unable to drive the car with any coherence. Her erratic behavior ended with the car being run into a nearby ditch before she got out and walked back to the road. But her drunkenness got the better of her, leading her to pass out in the street just moments later. It was fortunate that Sergeant Scott got there when he did, as multiple cars got dangerously close to hitting her. And if they hadn't swerved, she would certainly have been killed by the impact. Motorcyclist saves pink-haired woman. This biker was going about his business, preparing to make a delivery when he noticed a pink-haired woman rushing toward him, followed by a shady-looking and clearly agitated man. She's distressed, begging the biker to help her. Even in the footage, her distress is clear. This guy is not in his right mind. He's been chasing her for some time, and he was yelling something incoherent that was sending her into panic. It's obvious she had no clue who he is. But she had just found the one guy who was willing to help her. He could read the situation instantly, and he was not prepared to let it continue. As the man got closer to the bike, it became clear that he was on some kind of substance or drunk, totally incoherent and rambling, and a clear danger to himself and to others. He wasn't making any sense and seemed agitated by the fact that this girl had walked away from him. The biker knew exactly how to handle it. The biker told the man that she was his girlfriend. A pretty obvious lie, but an easy way to defuse the situation and shut down any aggression. The man was determined to make his point, but the biker refused to give in, calmly insisting that the man go away. And it worked. The man gave up fighting against the biker's wishes, choosing to wander off into the night rather than continue a losing battle. As soon as the man left, the pink-haired woman thanked the biker with a hug, knowing that he had likely just saved her life from who knows what kind of danger. Attempted kidnapping in alley. A security camera angled into an alley usually doesn't give much in terms of interesting footage. But this one was truly something to behold, with the owners of the camera never expecting to witness a miracle like this one. At first glance, this footage makes absolutely no sense. This young girl in the red coat seems to be waiting for something, maybe a ride or a friend or something, but suddenly she bolts off camera as if she's visibly terrified of something she just saw out of frame. When the owner of the camera first saw the footage, they had the same confused reaction. What did she see that gave her such an intense fright? So they rewound the footage back to the beginning, hoping to try and make sense of it. That's when it all fell into place. The girl had been walking down the alley alone, likely heading home, when a car suddenly pulled up beside her. Initially, she doesn't pay much attention to it, but the door opens and a hooded man in a mask goes to step out. He's obviously about to kidnap her, something that she also sees coming. She starts to back up, clearly terrified of the situation. But just as the car is about to back up and make a second attempt at grabbing her, a stray dog rounds the corner and charges with some force. He starts aggressively barking at the man in the car, scaring him enough to send the driver speeding away. The dog didn't belong to the girl or to the building or the owners of the camera. It was truly just a stray dog that happened to arrive at the perfect moment and became the hero of the internet. Had he not shown up at all, it's seriously unpleasant to think about what this poor girl would have gone through, and it's an absolute miracle that this dog knew what to do at that moment. But not as much of a miracle as it would be if you could hit that subscribe button. Let's keep moving to Level 3. Level 3. Masked Forest People. It was January 2015, and a group of film students in New Zealand were filming footage for one of their class projects near Auckland's Parnell railway station. The footage wasn't anything particularly special, just authentic footage from the surrounding environment that they could use for their eventual project. But suddenly they noticed something strange and, frankly, unsettling. In the long grass beside the train tracks, they saw a couple, seemingly a man and a woman, both wearing creepy white masks. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, staring at them. It was a deeply unsettling thing to happen to catch on camera, and something that the students laughed off, convinced that this was a prank. But then they started moving in strange ways, as if in formation. One of them climbed onto a nearby tanker and just silently stared. Suddenly, their laughter shifted to something much more anxious and nervous, unsure whether they would be able to make it out of this situation. But the closer she got to the students, the more terrifying it became. The students couldn't keep an eye on both of them at once, and once they got too close, the group decided to leave the location entirely. On the way home, they noticed a police chopper flying toward the location they had just left. However, the real terror came later. When the students got back home, they looked over the footage they captured and found something truly horrifying. While they hadn't noticed it in the moment, they could see that the couple were seemingly holding something in their hands. And that something looked suspiciously like a gun. One of them seemed to be holding a pistol as she walked, something that's undeniable when you see the clip. It's not clear who called the cops, but this was not the first time the couple scared people in the community this way. Creepy Elder. In Mexico City, Maria, an Uber driver, arrived in a dangerous area of the city to pick up her passengers. But when she arrived, the passengers weren't ready to go, so Maria had no choice but to wait when she happened to notice an old man wandering around this empty street. After wandering around aimlessly for a while, he notices her vehicle. Suddenly, he starts walking toward the car, circling it for a little while before he escalates the situation, leaning in to stare inside right at Maria. But he doesn't seem to do anything else. Obviously, Maria was deeply unnerved by the whole thing, which is exactly why she pulled out her phone to record the weird behavior. Nobody would have believed her if she told them what she had experienced. But even though he was being exceptionally creepy, the old man didn't do anything openly threatening. He just stood and kept staring without any effort to interact with Maria. He moved around to look through every single window in the car, a seriously creepy thing to do with no clear motive. He wasn't trying to get inside, he wasn't trying to break in, he was just standing and staring as though he had been possessed by something. Eventually, Maria's passengers arrived at the location, ready to leave, but by then the old man was firmly fixed on staring inside the vehicle. Maria, of course, wasted no time. The second the passengers were inside, she sped off into the distance, leaving the old man alone and still staring blankly ahead of him. When the footage was uploaded, the internet was fascinated by the uneasy vibe of the whole clip. There's truly no rational reason for the old man to be doing this, yet he has no interest in stopping. It's highly likely he was on some kind of intense drug leading him to hallucinate something that wasn't there. But that just means Maria and her passengers should be happy that the situation did not escalate. Ghost Door. Ms. Yara was minding her own business, feeding her baby on the couch while watching a movie. But suddenly, she noticed the kitchen door slowly opening on its own. Nobody else was in the house, there were no animals, no explanations for what could be happening. And that sent Ms. Yara into a serious visceral panic. Someone could jump out at any moment and possibly even kill her. Concerned that someone might have broken into her home, she stopped the movie and grabbed her phone, hoping to record whatever creepy phenomenon was happening before her eyes. The footage does pick up some creepy creaking noises that make it sound as though someone is wandering around the kitchen.
Oh my god.
It also captures the moment she begged for whoever it was to leave the house and not harm her or her baby.
Please go away. Please go away. You're not wanted. Go away. Whatever you are, go away.
But there was no immediate response beyond the sound of the ice maker in the kitchen, confirming that something was going on. Ms. Yara felt a presence in the house, and she could hear noises as though something was alive in the room just out of her sight. Eventually, she saw a dark, shadowy figure briefly appear before leaving the room entirely, as if obeying her wishes. When the spirit was finally gone from the house, Ms. Yara looked back over the footage to see if she had imagined the whole thing, but no, it was right there on camera. She uploaded the footage, hoping that people online would have experienced a similar situation, but most people who saw the footage were just shocked that Ms. Yara was brave enough not to leave her house. Sushi Potato groped in public. During a 2021 livestream in Tokyo, Japanese Twitch streamer Sushi Potato encountered 3 male fans who requested photos with her. Initially happy to encounter her fans, she agreed while positioning her hand over her low-cut top for modesty. But one man demanded she remove her hand, and when she refused, another forcibly grabbed her wrist to pry it away from her chest. The camera captured her frozen expression as the group took pictures while she stood rigid, her jaw clenched and eyes wide. She had just been harassed in front of the world. This violation occurred months after she suffered another public harassment incident. While live streaming in June 2021, Sushi Potato had sat cross-legged on a sidewalk to chat with a stranger. As they listened to music together, the man suddenly reached toward her boobs. She threw water at him and forced him to leave the scene before it could escalate further. Both assaults unfolded during street streams with the world watching, showing how bold and unashamed the harassers were. In the photo incident, the men maintained smiles throughout, treating the attack as a game, as if she had no real feelings or humanity about her. But in both cases, Sushi Potato resumes the stream immediately afterward, but her voice can be heard shaking. The video later circulated internationally in 2024, falsely attributed to India until fact-checkers identified the Tokyo location through cinema signage and verified Sushi Potato's streaming history. Bandit attack. On November 30th, 2018, Utah natives Bryant and Lauren Swenson found themselves navigating Kenya's rugged Kijabe Road, a last-minute route switch to avoid the blocked-up traffic on the main roads. Their Toyota Land Cruiser was also carrying fitness trainer Shiv Simani and colleague Collins Monde on a routine drive that turned lethal within seconds. As they rounded a bend, they encountered a stalled public van surrounded by 3 masked men, bandits. 2 of the bandits brandished machetes, their blades glinting in the sunlight, while a third fumbled with a handgun tucked in his waistband. The ambush site had been strategically chosen. Potholes and rough terrain forced vehicles to slow, giving attackers an advantage. The Swensons' dashcam footage showed the robbers sprinting toward their Land Cruiser, weapons raised. Bryant slammed the manual transmission into reverse, buying critical seconds to roll up the windows as Lauren shouted, "Drive." The footage shows the bandits closing in, swinging machetes at an accelerating vehicle, but Bryant shifted gears again, lurching forward through a cloud of dust as their steel blades struck the car. The police opened fire on the gang just as they escaped the scene with their lives intact. Unknown to them, they'd passed 2 armed officers minutes before the attack but chose not to stop and pick them up, saving them from a potentially deadly firefight. Kenyan media later reported the ambush occurred along a known crime corridor, though the Swensons had no prior warning. Armed robbery in NOLA. It was February 10th, 2025, and a couple was walking through the dimly lit streets of Broadmoor, New Orleans, just after 9:30 p.m. This surveillance footage captures the moment that their casual conversation abruptly stops as a hooded figure emerges from a side alley, blocking their path with a pistol aimed at chest height. The husband instantly steps in front of his wife, moving them around the front of a parked car to shield themselves from any potential injury. But the assailant, whose face is obscured by a black ski mask, gestures violently with the weapon, suggesting he's demanding something. But the messy audio makes it impossible to know.
What you want, bro? What you want? What you want? What you want? What you want?
For the next few seconds, the gunman waves the gun around until finally the husband removes his jacket and hands it over to the guy. Satisfied with what he has, the man immediately flees the scene. The police later confirmed the weapon was a modified 9mm Glock with an illegal extended magazine, meaning that this encounter could have turned deadly had the aggressor followed through with their threats. Alyssa Vanilla. Alyssa Vanilla is a solo female van lifer who uses her YouTube platform to document her daily life moving around the United States. But this encounter was far more disturbing than any other she had ever experienced. While camping in the remote desert outside Tucson, Arizona, an unidentified man in an ATV approached her campsite unannounced. He initiated a conversation by asking if she needed water, then casually revealed he wasn't a park ranger but a local resident. The man lingered despite Alyssa's guarded responses and clearly disinterest in talking to him, detailing his family life in a way that felt performative. He said his wife lived nearby and that she was welcome to come for a shower, but suggested she visit when he's home to avoid arousing any suspicion. When asked about her camping plans, he replied, "If you do stay, I'll see you again," a statement that sounded far more like a threat than anything else. Hours later, the man returned, but this time he claimed a stranger was watching Alyssa through binoculars from a nearby mountain ridge. He suggested that they should relocate to an exposed area he felt was safer. But that's a direct contradiction of basic safety logic for solo campers. However, the most unsettling part of it was his description of the stalker. He said the guy was someone who checks if people have water, the exact thing he did earlier. Unnerved by the situation, Alyssa packed to leave, but the man didn't depart. Instead, he sat motionless on his ATV, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring silently and making no conversation while she dismantled her camp. Throughout the encounter, Alyssa maintained a calm demeanor while filming discreetly, capturing the man's shifting narratives and constant unsettling presence until she could finally escape the situation. Attempted abduction. This footage was captured on the 6th train in the Bronx. The train was almost empty as it pulled into the Morrison Avenue Soundview station, but this man in the bright red jacket was obsessively staring at a young girl asleep by the window. As the train comes into the station, the man leans in, gently nudging her companion, but the person she's with doesn't move. Taking this opportunity, the man lunges forward, grabbing the girl's torso and dragging her out onto the platform, kicking and screaming. As she causes a scene, passengers start shouting to try and draw attention, but the girl manages to break free and scrambles back onto the car, screaming about the man that just tried to abduct her.
What the fuck? Fuck! Fuck! Stop what you're doing! What the fuck? Bob, get the fuck up! Get up! You think he's trying to grab me? You think he's grabbing me at the train? Yo, the nigga just had to scream at him, look!
The guy who did it doesn't even try to run. He just sits there watching as the train leaves, knowing that he was never going to get caught. Or so he thought. His name was Sonny Alloway, and when the footage went viral online, he couldn't escape it. Outside a Bronx deli, the locals recognized him and immediately decided to give him special treatment by beating him up. He insisted he didn't do anything, but police were on the scene to arrest him within minutes. Fortunately, the woman wasn't hurt, but she never formally reported the incident, leaving prosecutors reliant on the video and witness accounts. However, Alloway had a long criminal history, including prior weapons and assault charges. Carolina Judah. A young TikToker, Carolina Judah, was walking home late at night when she realized that a man was following her through the foggy streets. She got on her bus home, but the man was still following her. When she got off the bus and continued her journey home, he was right there at every step of the way. And no matter how much she tried to ignore him, he was always there and always caught on her camera. Even when she started speeding up, it seems like he's chasing her, not letting up for even a moment. But suddenly the situation escalated as he began shouting something at her. Carolina couldn't make out exactly what he was shouting, but it was clear that he was behaving very strangely, as though he had been drinking or indulging in some kind of drugs. The second she turned the corner, Carolina sprinted her way home, determined to escape him, but she was not out of the woods. 23 minutes after arriving home, she heard the doorbell at the gate start to ring. She knew that he had found her home. Terrified of how unhinged this man was behaving, she called her mom, but her mom didn't pick up. When she peered outside the window, she could see the man standing right outside her gate, as though waiting for her. Tired of playing her game, he jumped her gate and tried to open her door directly. Carolina locked herself in the bathroom, continuing to call her parents until they picked up, allowing her to finally explain the situation. Eventually, he stopped trying to get into her home, but Carolina didn't move. She was afraid that it was a trap. Her parents eventually arrived, but the man was long gone. And when the video was uploaded to TikTok, Carolina was cruelly criticized by people who argued that she should have led the stalker to a well-lit, populated area. But given that there was no place like that on her way home, her options were very much limited. There was nothing she could have done. Soaked woman. In 2022, a TikToker went on a late-night drive in a remote area of Belmont, Michigan, when she happened to spot a woman who looked like she was soaking wet on the side of the road. It didn't make any sense. It hadn't been raining anytime soon, and it seemed unlikely that this woman had come from any kind of home. The TikToker naturally came to the conclusion that this bizarre situation must have been some kind of trap to get her out of the car and ambush her. She could be robbed or killed or something else altogether. So she decided to keep driving, but to call the police to inform them of the situation. When the officers eventually arrived at the scene, they found the woman on her hands and knees, still soaking wet. When they interviewed her, she was completely confused. She had no idea who she was, how she got there, or why, but the TikToker couldn't let it go. The next day, she drove back to the location and began looking around to try and figure out how exactly this woman could have gotten so drenched in such a dry area. She discovered a nearby river, which explained quite a lot about what happened. As it turns out, the woman was a missing person from Kalamazoo. She had no idea what had happened to her, where she came from, or even that she fell into the river or made it to Belmont. It was as though her entire week had never happened. Mom of 4. On February 10th, 2022, Calvin Crew climbed into Christina Spicuzza's Uber wearing a hood and mask. For the next 18 minutes, Christina's dashcam captured her trying to make casual conversation with a man who is clearly muttering incoherently. But then, he shifts to the center seat, yanks her ponytail, and presses a pistol to her skull. Despite the intense situation, Christina calmly begs him for mercy, explaining that she has 4 children at home. But Crew coldly replies, "I have a family too," before snatching her phone and ripping the camera from the dashboard. For the next hour, unseen by the severed cams, Spicuzza is forced to navigate deserted roads while Crew assesses her banking apps to steal her money. Detectives later reconstructed her final moments through GPS data and financial records, revealing transfers initiated under unthinkable duress. Her body was discovered 2 days later in a Monroeville wooded area, face down, with a single gunshot wound to the head and her COVID mask still secured. The murder weapon, registered to Crew's girlfriend, was never recovered and remains lost. Investigators traced Crew through license plate readers, cell tower pings, and a fingerprint he left on the discarded dashcam. His girlfriend testified he'd used her account to order the Uber and later confessed to the killing during a FaceTime call. At trial, prosecutors presented the harrowing video and testimony from Spicuzza's partner, who reported her missing when she failed to return home. On February 10, 2025, exactly 3 years after the murder, the jury convicted Crew of first-degree murder after less than an hour of deliberation. Level 4. Home Invasion. In 2015, a homeowner returned home in San Jose, California to discover that his door was open. Somebody had forced their way into his house, stealing some of his most precious valuables but leaving not too much damage. However, the investigating police strongly advised the family to invest in a security camera system to protect themselves from any future incidents that could repeat. So they took the advice very seriously, installing a number of cameras to keep an eye on the situation. Months later, in that same year, those same cameras happened to capture one of the most horrifying, stressful situations the family had ever experienced. At 10:55 a.m., 2 burglars arrived at the house, walking around the back of the property and discovering an unlocked sliding door. They quietly slipped inside, unaware that they're on camera the whole time. They immediately went to the kitchen, taking a look around for anything valuable to take with them, and also to grab some knives in case they happened to encounter an unfortunate member of the family. Like, for example, the woman who was home alone with her baby upstairs. The 2 burglars severed the phone line, ensuring that the woman cannot call for help. But that's when they heard the noises of the baby upstairs. Immediately, they rushed upstairs, following the sounds to the woman's bedroom. But by the time they got there, the door was locked, with the terrified mother inside cradling her child. Fortunately, the lock was strong enough to hold. No matter how hard they tried to break down the door, it just wouldn't give. They couldn't get inside. And even if they did, the mother had locked herself in the bathroom. But then she revealed that she already called the police before they cut the phone line. Realizing that the cops were on the way, the men fled the house in seconds. Concealing the knife, they disappeared into the distance. Police reports later confirmed that one suspect surrendered himself to authorities shortly after, revealing himself as a 17-year-old man. He was placed in custody at juvenile hall. But the homeowner, despite being shaken about what happened to his wife, was relieved that the situation was prevented and publicly praised the security cameras for making justice possible. Rachel Navarro. TikToker Rachel Navarro was in a very unusual situation in her new home. She had moved into her new apartment not long before the video, but there was a very unsettling trait that she didn't anticipate. She said she was just sitting alone watching something on her computer when she happened to notice something strange going on. The door was shaking and moving as though someone on the other side was trying to get in. When she looked through the peephole, she was convinced she could see someone on the other side, so she grabbed her phone, starting to record the entire situation as it unfolded. For hours, she had heard noises and bizarre movements going on outside. But whenever she went to check it out, she saw nothing outside. Nobody was around, and there was no clear source of the sound. When she called out, "Hello," all she could hear was the unsettling sound of someone breathing heavily on the other side. With the camera capturing every moment, Rachel decided she was going to open the door and find out once and for all. But once again, when she opened the door, nobody was there. The hallway was completely empty. The breathing and the shadow she saw through the peephole were completely gone. But the noise didn't stop.
Hold on. I'm going out there.
The video picked up the bizarre sounds of the extremely dark hallway, the strange whooshing or breathing sounds echoing through the pitch-black hallway. When she posted the video on TikTok, the responses were all overwhelmingly creeped out by what they were watching. While some were convinced that she had witnessed a ghost, others said that she was being stalked. But pretty much everybody agreed that the only way Rachel would be safe would be to get cameras, or, if she was really uncertain about what was going on, to contact the police before it was too late. Attempted kidnapping. In New York, a group of kids were playing happily outside their home. But suddenly, a car pulled up and a strange man got out, opening the trunk of his car. This unfamiliar bald man started talking to them, approaching them and inviting them into his car. These kids were immediately unnerved by the creepiness of this man, and smart enough to know that if they get into that car, nothing good is going to come of it. They have to get out of this situation immediately. So they quickly ran up the steps to try and get away from him, hoping that he would take the hint and leave the scene. But even though the kids were fleeing into the house, the man had already committed. His trunk was up, waiting. No parents were around. He was not about to give up so easily. The surveillance camera captures the moment as he calmly walks up the steps, hands behind his back. He had no idea he's being recorded as he stops outside the door, peering through the gate. The man tries to force his way into the house, pulling the gate open and entering, but the kids had already locked it, protecting themselves from this seemingly deranged predator. He cannot get in. He cannot hurt them. Angry, he tried to pull it with both hands, but the lock was too strong. These kids knew exactly who he was before he even opened his mouth. Now they were out of reach, and he was not going to get inside anytime soon. Half convinced they would just come back outside, the man hangs around by the gate, clearly frustrated and disappointed that he couldn't achieve his sick, twisted goal. He had acted too slowly, targeting the wrong kids for this to work. Eventually, realizing that the ship had sailed, the man had no choice but to get back into his car and leave the scene, presumably on the lookout for his next targets. Woman in the attic. For months, Joe, a New Yorker, was convinced he had a problem in his Fukuoka apartment. Every night, food was going missing. Rice portions shrank, snacks disappeared from sealed cabinets, milk cartons emptied overnight. He checked the windows, the door locks, and reinforced them, but it kept happening. He was sleepwalking and just couldn't remember what he was doing. But then, the kitchen utensils started turning up in strange locations that made no sense. He started hearing floorboards creak at night. Half convinced he was going insane, he installed motion-activated cameras linked to his phone, scanning the feeds during work breaks. Weeks passed without any triggers, but then a midday alert showed his living room TV flickering to life. And there, on the screen, he saw a woman in mismatched layers standing inches from the lens, methodically wiping crumbs from his coffee table. She was moving like a ghost. Security footage timestamped 3:14 a.m. captured her sliding vertically from a storage closet above his entryway. She rationed his leftovers, ate standing at the sink, and scrubbed dishes before retreating back into her hiding spot whenever she heard him. Daylight hours found her curled in the 60-centimeter wide closet space, surrounded by water bottles and a threadbare blanket. He couldn't believe that there was a woman living with him that he never even knew about. Joe went and reviewed older clips to discover that she'd laundered his towels and organized his shoes. She'd showered while he slept 2 meters away, with steam still fogging up the bathroom mirror at sunrise. But police discovered no forced entry. She didn't break in. The woman had just taken advantage of an unlocked door a year prior. She left no fingerprints on valuables and no traces of her presence beyond a faint indentation in the closet's dust. When the police turned up for a surprise inspection, they found her nestled in the compartment. She apologized for borrowing warmth, explaining she'd timed her movements to his snoring patterns, monitoring his schedule through wall vibrations, exiting only for nighttime bathroom breaks in his sink. And Joe never had any idea. Shadow in an abandoned school. YouTuber Chris made the brave decision to go exploring in an abandoned school at night. Stories around this school had centered on some very sinister goings-on inside, including sacrifices and worse. From the second he entered the school, the darkness and the quiet was terrifying, and every step was only making his anxiety worse and worse. But he wasn't about to stop. His breathing gets more and more intense throughout the video, but suddenly the vibe changes. He's convinced he can hear footsteps, someone moving around the building not far from where he is. But whenever he turns to the sound, he can't see anything. Chris continues exploring, determined to try not to let it get him overthinking. But then, in a moment of pure coincidence, he turns around and notices a shadow moving around. Yet when he follows it, whoever there is gone. There's no door there to escape through. What he saw was impossible. There could not have been a human there, or he would have found it. Chris is so terrified by this point that he decides to climb to the roof to see more and catch a quick breath. He knows that if the police catch him, he's in trouble. And whatever is inside the school is so terrifying and unknowable that he doesn't want to hang around anymore. So he decides he has to leave. The night has scared him too much to push forward. Chris makes it out safely, but he'll never forget this encounter. When he uploaded the video to YouTube, his followers were all convinced that what Chris witnessed was not human, but a ghost or something far, far more sinister. Level 5. Woman attacked by tiger. On July 23, 2016, a family touring Beijing's Badaling Wildlife World entered the Siberian tiger enclosure in their car. But Zhao Zhang was so irritated by her husband's driving that she decided she wanted to be the one to drive immediately. Security footage shows the car slowing to a stop near the dense foliage. Without any clear warning, Zhao climbs out of the passenger side, walks around the front of the vehicle, and opens the driver's door. She's tense and clearly irritated by the argument within the car. But just as she leans into the car, a 400-pound tiger leaps from the undergrowth. It lunges at Zhao, clamping its jaws around her neck and dragging her backwards into the grass. Her husband scrambles out, shouting, but freezes as the predator vanishes with his wife. Seconds later, Zhao's 57-year-old mother, Li, bolts from the car in pursuit, ignoring the roars echoing through the enclosure. She just wants to get her daughter back. But there's a second tiger stalking the road. And as Li sprints towards her daughter's limp form, which is now partially obscured, the second tiger intercepts her mid-stride and tackles her to the ground. At this point, you can see park staff in a patrol vehicle blasting air horns and revving their engines to try and stop the chaos, but the attack continues for another 20 minutes. By the time the tigers were handled, Li sustained catastrophic injuries to her face and neck, dying before the paramedics could arrive. But against all odds, Zhao survived. She had deep lacerations, spinal damage, and a permanent facial scarring, but she was somehow alive. Unfortunately, the family had signed a safety agreement that clearly forbid exiting in predator zones, though Zhao claimed the staff failed to properly explain the rules. Zhao sued the park for inadequate emergency response and insufficient warnings, but the park faced no legal liability, citing clear negligence by visitors. Tommy Braley found. On August 25, 2017, Tommy Braley left Brewer's Bar and Grill in Sumter, South Carolina in his silver BMW 325i and vanished. For the next 7 years, his family clung to fragmented hopes. Was he alive somewhere? Why had no trace of the car surfaced? Described as the glue of his family, Braley's absence left a void, with relatives organizing searches and pleading for answers, but they got none for years. In late December 2024, scuba divers Adam Brown and Jason Sorada arrived in Sumter armed with sonar equipment to scan the waterways near Crestwood High School, a route Braley would have taken home. The team focused on a small creek off Highway 401, which had never been fully explored in the investigation. Hours of methodical scanning led to the discovery of a faint outline. A vehicle submerged 10 feet below the surface. A BMW. Authorities were immediately alerted, and a tow truck hauled the waterlogged BMW out of the creek. It matched Braley's car exactly, and inside, slumped in the driver's seat, were skeletal remains. The Braley family had to wait for confirmation, which only made the anxiety even worse. But dental records confirmed the worst. Tommy had been in the car all along and had just never been discovered. But now there were even more questions. How had the BMW remained undetected in a shallow, publicly accessible creek for nearly a decade? Why had earlier searches missed it? Adam Brown later reflected on the proximity of the site to Braley's home, saying that it was a tragedy that such a short distance had separated the family from the answers they deserved. However, investigators haven't discussed potential causes of death or how the car entered the water, leaving the final moments of Braley's disappearance an unsolved mystery. Wanted man attacks young girl. This 13-year-old girl was on her way home, unaware that she was being followed by a creepy man. But the whole thing was caught on security camera, and nobody could have expected the direction the encounter took. Seeing an opportunity, the man approached the girl at her front door, claiming that he was lost and needed help finding his way home. But the girl knew something was off. She immediately rushed into the house, but couldn't move fast enough. The man forced his way into the house, determined to attack her and finish what he started. But as soon as he grabbed her, the girl fought back, slapping and scratching his face before he eventually let go. When he realized the house was full of cameras aimed right at the spot where he attacked the girl, he started to panic, fleeing the house entirely. The girl immediately called her dad, informing him of what had happened, and he rushed home to check on her. A police investigation confirmed that this man was already wanted for trying to assault a woman at a shopping mall just a month earlier. If she hadn't thought as quickly as she did, the girl would have been subjected to even more harm and never got the justice she deserved. Level 6. Vlad NCL harassed. Vlad NCL is a Russian YouTuber famous for his extremely unique social experiments. He dresses as a woman, adopting a much higher voice, and wanders the streets of New York City to see how he's treated as a woman. But one of these experiments got a little too close for comfort. Vlad was wandering the streets when a man suddenly approached him and said that she looked beautiful. Almost immediately, the man pushed into Vlad's personal space, insisting on buying this woman a drink. Even though she said no, the man refused to give up. Suddenly, he insisted that he liked this woman and wanted to get to know her more. Even though Vlad was giving off all the signals that this woman was not interested, the man continued pushing his face toward hers. And then he started looking as though he was about to do something very, very bad. No matter how much Vlad insisted on going home alone, the man insisted on going with her, even touching her without consent. Every time he went to kiss her or make a move, Vlad was forced to push back, but the guy even made it clear that her resistance and discomfort were only turning him on more. Frustrated that this guy was not listening when Vlad said to stop touching, Vlad finally pushed him with some force, catching him by surprise. But even that seemed to just make him more in awe of this woman. Eventually, Vlad managed to get out of the situation, but he noted in the video how unsettled he was that so many people went past and did not bother to help at all, suggesting that if something went wrong, nobody would have stepped in. Murder of Mirna Salehin. On January 6, 2016, 27-year-old Wayan Mirna Salehin, a recently married socialite and daughter of a prominent Indonesian businessman, arrived at an upscale cafe to meet her friends. The CCTV footage shows one of her friends, Jessica Kumala Wongso, arriving almost an hour early, securing a table and ordering a Vietnamese iced coffee for Mirna alongside 2 cocktails. Before Mirna and her other friend Hani arrived at 5:16 p.m., Jessica positioned shopping bags on the table, partially obscuring the camera's view of the drinks. Mirna took 1 sip of the coffee, grimaced, and allegedly said, "It tastes awful." Suddenly, within seconds, she clutched her throat, convulsed violently, and foamed at the mouth as her body slumped to the floor. Hani and the cafe staff rushed to help, but Jessica stood motionless, repeatedly rubbing her palms and inexplicably accusing the staff of poisoning her coffee. Mirna was declared dead en route to the hospital, with initial autopsies suggesting cyanide poisoning despite conflicting toxicology reports. Unfortunately for Jessica, cyanide is known to be irritating to the skin, and she was caught on camera rubbing her hands. The grainy CCTV footage became a focal point of the trial. Everything that Jessica did before her friends showed up, adjusting the bags, handling her purse, and waiting alone with the drinks, was increasingly viewed as highly suspicious behavior. Prosecutors argued she used the bags to hide pouring cyanide into the coffee. Witnesses noticed how calm Jessica was during the chaos, contrasting sharply with Hani's panic. Something was off. But while Jessica was sentenced for the murder, the outcome was never fully determined. The lack of clear evidence meant that it was impossible to say whether or not Jessica was guilty or not, leaving it open to public interpretation. Doreen Erbert. On Halloween night, 1984, Doreen Erbert, 8 months pregnant, stayed home with her 4-year-old daughter, Deanna, while her husband, Charles, left the house to make a quick errand. But during this time, a harsh knock at the door interrupted the evening. When Doreen opened the door, she found herself face to face with a man in a cartoonish wolf mask wielding an 18-inch machete. She screamed at him to get out of the house, pushing Deanna behind the couch to protect her. The attacker used the blade to slash Doreen's abdomen with such force that blood sprayed the ceiling and walls. When Charles returned later, he found the front door unlocked and Doreen dead in a pool of blood, her left hand severed. Their unborn son had been expelled from her womb, laying nearby with a severed leg and fatal chest wound. Blood soaked the floor, walls, and a grinning jack-o'-lantern on a stool. Deanna was the lone survivor, telling her dad how the masked man threatened to come back and finish the job if she spoke about what happened. The police followed a blood trail from the Erberts' home across a pedestrian overpass to William Michael Dennis's neighborhood. They found him bandaging deep cuts on his right hand. Inspecting his house, they found that his garage washing machine contained blood-stained clothes, and his truck's steering wheel was marked by smeared blood. A wolf mask, matching the one worn at a prior Halloween party and left at the crime scene, also appeared in photos inside Dennis's closet. Receipts linked him to a machete matching the murder weapon. The evidence was overwhelming. He also happened to be Doreen's ex. Dennis claimed he'd accidentally cut himself with a kitchen knife, but autopsy reports confirmed Doreen and the fetus died from chopping wounds inflicted by a heavy blade, and neighbors reported seeing a wolf-masked man stalking the Erbert Street earlier that night. When he was finally forced to stand trial, Dennis's psychiatric defense cited delusions stemming from his son's drowning 4 years earlier, which he inexplicably blamed on Doreen, but he couldn't save himself from justice. Kidnapping and of Sarah Everard. On the evening of March 3, 2021, Sarah Everard left a friend's house near Clapham Common, London, at 9:00 p.m. CCTV footage captured her walking alone towards Brixton, speaking to her boyfriend on the phone for 14 minutes. At 9:34 p.m., a London bus camera recorded her standing with a police officer near a white Vauxhall Crossland with flashing hazard lights. The officer was the off-duty Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Cousins, who presented his warrant card and falsely arrested her for violating COVID-19 lockdown rules. He handcuffed her on the pavement and forced her into the vehicle. With his hostage in the car, Cousins drove 80 miles toward Kent, switching cars in Dover shortly before midnight. By 12:57 a.m., his phone was locating him in remote woodland near Ashford, where he raped Everard before strangling her to death with his police-issued belt. Security cameras later captured him at a Dover surface station at 2:34 a.m. He was buying drinks with nobody even thinking to suspect that this man had a woman's body lying dead in the trunk of his car. He transported her body to Hodes Woods, a piece of land he owned, stuffing her remains into an abandoned refrigerator, dousing it with gas and flammable materials. Over the next 3 days, Cousins maintained his routine, attending a dental appointment with his children, emailing his supervisor about his work stress, and returning to the woods to incinerate Everard's body to fully remove any evidence that could be traced back to him. On March 5th, he purchased builder's bags from B&Q, using them as weights to submerge her charred remains in a pond. It wasn't until later, when investigators traced his movements through all of these cameras, that they saw the true extent of what he did and caught him on camera disposing of Everard's phone in the River Star. Sarah's family reported her missing on March 4th. By March 10th, dental records confirmed her identity after police discovered the bags in Hodes Woods, all but proving that Cousins was responsible. To defend himself, Cousins initially fabricated a story about Eastern European gang coercion, but cell site data and DNA evidence, including his semen and her blood in his car, left no credible innocent explanation. Caught out, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping and receiving a rare whole-life sentence for the depravity of his crimes. Level 7. The Sushi Stalker. In 2004, Rie Miyoshi began dating Hideto Kozutsumi, but by 2006, she ended the relationship due to his increasingly unsettling behavior toward her. But even though the relationship was over, Hideto was far from happy with it. Over the next 4 years, Hideto's fixation only intensified. By 2010, Rie reported him to the police for relentless stalking and threatening emails, which included words like, "I'm definitely going to kill you." Yet, despite her pleas, authorities took limited action, arresting Hideto only in June 2011 under Japan's anti-stalking law. He received a suspended sentence for his actions. But unbeknownst to Rie, critical mistakes were unfolding. During Hideto's arrest, police accidentally disclosed her new married name and address while reading the charges against him. He immediately used the information to his benefit, hiring a private investigator who tricked Zushi city officials into revealing her location by posing as her husband. These breaches handed Hideto the tools to hunt down the woman he believed was his. After his release, the harassment continued at an alarming speed. Between April and November 2012, Hideto bombarded Rie with over 1,000 emails demanding monetary compensation for her breach of contract after she married another man. Increasingly scared for her life, Rie returned to the police, but they dismissed the emails as non-threatening. They were wrong. On November 6, 2012, Hideto arrived at Rie's Zushi apartment while her husband was at work. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting she might have opened the door under duress or intimidation. But as soon as he was inside, Hideto stabbed her repeatedly, killing her. With Rie dead, he hanged himself from her second-floor balcony. By the time police found Rie's phone, her inbox was filled with unanswered emails, many repeating the same demands. The tragedy exposed a series of systemic failures in Japanese law enforcement. Lax enforcement of stalking laws, careless handling of victim information by authorities, and loopholes allowing perpetrators to exploit third parties like private investigators. Rie's attempts to rebuild her life were futile because the system had no interest in protecting her. If you're a fan of disturbing encounters, you need to check out this video.